can work for shelter, any way you need," the desperate widow whispered through the storm, her trembling hands clutching her torn shawl as rain soaked through to her skin. But the stern Amish rancher stepped back, shaking his head firmly. "You don't owe me anything." The frontier town had already written her obituary. Another drifter who'd freeze in the wilderness or disappear into unmarked graves. Shopkeepers crossed themselves when she passed, whispering about the curse that followed destitute women. The rancher's unexpected mercy defied every cruel assumption. His weathered barn offering sanctuary, his community would never forgive him for providing. Yet neither realizes. She carries documents worth more than his entire settlement, papers that powerful men have killed to obtain. Will his principled compassion save them both, or doom them to the same unmarked fate the town expects? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The mud squelched beneath Celeste Hartwell's worn boots as she stumbled through the streets of Millbrook, Missouri. Her water-damaged carpetbag felt heavier with each step. The storm clouds above matched the darkness settling in her chest. A shopkeeper spotted her approach and quickly flipped his sign to closed. The blacksmith pretended to be busy hammering cold metal. Two women in fine dresses crossed the street rather than share the same wooden walkway. Another drifter looking for handouts, one whispered loud enough for Celeste to hear. The other woman clutched her purse tighter. "Best keep the children inside tonight." Celeste pulled her torn shawl closer around her shoulders. 3 days without proper food had left her weak. The coins in her pocket wouldn't buy a meal, let alone shelter from the approaching storm. The last building on the outskirts caught her attention. A simple farmhouse sat beside a weathered barn. Smoke curled from the chimney. Light flickered in the windows. She knocked on the heavy wooden door with trembling fingers. A tall man opened it. His plain clothes and trimmed beard marked him as Amish. Deep lines around his eyes suggested years of hard work under the prairie sun. "Please, sir," Celeste's voice barely rose above a whisper. "I need shelter for the night. I can work for it. Any way you need." The man studied her face. Rain began to patter on the porch roof. "I'm Levi Stoltzfus." He stepped aside without hesitation. "You don't owe me anything." Celeste stared at him in disbelief. No one had shown her kindness in weeks. An older woman appeared behind Levi. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple bun. Suspicious eyes examined Celeste from head to toe. "This is my mother, Rebecca," Levi said. "Mother, our guest needs dry clothes and warm food." Rebecca's expression softened slightly. "Come, child. You're soaked through." The farmhouse interior was sparse but clean. A stone fireplace provided warmth. Simple wooden furniture filled the main room. No fancy decorations adorned the walls. Celeste accepted a bowl of vegetable soup with shaking hands. The warmth spread through her empty stomach. Rebecca handed her a rough towel for her wet hair. "Where are you traveling to?" Rebecca asked. Celeste hesitated. The truth would raise too many questions. West, looking for work. Dangerous journey for a woman alone. Rebecca's tone carried no judgment. Through the window, Celeste watched the storm intensify. Lightning illuminated the rolling prairie. Thunder rumbled in the distance. "You can sleep in the barn loft," Levi said. "It's dry and warm enough." "Thank you." Celeste's voice cracked with emotion. "Both of you." The next morning brought clear skies and harsh reality. Celeste woke to voices outside the barn. "Levi Stoltzfus harboring that woman is a disgrace to our community." She crept to the window. 3 men in dark suits stood near the farmhouse. The tallest wore a silver star on his vest. His hand rested casually on his gun belt. "Sheriff Pike," Levi's calm voice carried across the yard. "What brings you out so early?" "Concerned citizens, Levi. That woman you're sheltering has folks worried." "Worried about what, exactly?" "Her kind brings trouble. Disease, thievery. You know how it is." Celeste's stomach clenched. She recognized the tone. the same dismissive cruelty she'd faced in town after town. "She's done nothing wrong," Levi replied firmly. "Yet," Sheriff Pike adjusted his hat, "Mayor Blackwood wants to see you this afternoon. Town Hall, 2 o'clock sharp." The men mounted their horses and rode away. Celeste remained hidden until their dust settled. Inside the farmhouse, Rebecca was kneading bread dough with unusual force. "Trouble?" Celeste asked quietly. "Nothing we can't handle," Rebecca said, but worry lines creased her forehead. Levi entered through the back door. His jaw was set in determination. "I should go," Celeste said quickly, "before I cause more problems." "Nonsense." Rebecca's hands never stopped working the dough. "We don't abandon people in need." "But the sheriff is Mayor Blackwood's lapdog," Levi finished. "Blackwood runs this town like his personal kingdom." Celeste felt her carpetbag where it sat beside the hearth. Hidden in its lining were documents that could change everything. Documents that certain people would kill to obtain. "Who is Mayor Blackwood?" she asked carefully. "Cornelius Blackwood owns half the businesses in town, controls the other half through debts and favors." Levi's voice carried obvious distaste. "Lately he's been very interested in surrounding farmland." Rebecca nodded grimly. 3 families lost their properties last month. Tax liens appeared overnight. Sheriff enforced them immediately. Celeste's blood chilled. The pattern was familiar. Too familiar. "What happened to the families?" "Disappeared. Told they could find work in Kansas City." Levi shook his head. "Never heard from again." Through the window, Celeste spotted a rider approaching. The man wore expensive clothes and rode a fine horse. His smile appeared friendly, but his eyes remained cold as winter frost. "Mayor Blackwood himself," Rebecca muttered. Celeste grabbed her carpetbag and headed for the stairs. "I'll stay out of sight." From the upper window, she watched the conversation below. Blackwood's gestures grew more animated. Levi's stance remained rigid. Their voices carried faintly through the glass. Something about property taxes, immediate assessment, community standards. When Blackwood finally rode away, his friendly mask had slipped completely. Celeste clutched her bag tighter. The documents inside could destroy men like Blackwood. They could also get her killed. The question now was whether Levi's principled courage would be enough to protect them both when the truth finally emerged. 3 days after Mayor Blackwood's visit, Rebecca discovered the truth by accident. Celeste's dress had torn on a barn nail. The fabric needed mending before it fell apart completely. Rebecca spread the garment across her sewing table. The tear revealed something unexpected. Papers rustled inside the lining. Carefully sewn pockets held documents wrapped in oiled cloth. "Celeste," Rebecca called softly. "Come here, please." Celeste descended the stairs slowly. Her face went pale when she saw the exposed papers. "I can explain." Rebecca's weathered fingers touched the documents gently. "These look important." Levi entered from the fields. Dirt covered his work clothes. He stopped short when he saw the papers scattered across the table. Legal seals caught the afternoon light. Official signatures marked the bottom of each page. The name Hartwell appeared repeatedly in bold script. "Land deeds," Levi said quietly. Celeste sank into a chair. Her secret was finally exposed. The Hartwell Ranch. 15,000 acres stretching from here to the Missouri River. Her voice trembled. "It belonged to my father, then my husband. Now it's mine." Rebecca's eyes widened. 15,000 acres? The largest spread in 3 counties. Celeste's hands shook as she gathered the papers. Or it was, before someone started stealing pieces. Levi leaned against the doorframe. His mind raced through the implications. "You're wealthy. On paper. In reality, I've been running for my life. The room fell silent except for the ticking of Rebecca's clock. My husband died 6 months ago. Horse threw him during a storm. Celeste's voice grew stronger. His family claimed these documents were destroyed in the accident. But you had them, hidden them. My father taught me never to trust important papers to others. She smoothed one of the deeds carefully. He learned that lesson the hard way in Pennsylvania. Rebecca sat down across from her. What happened in Pennsylvania? Railroad men wanted our land, claimed eminent domain. Father fought them. In court for 3 years. Celeste's eyes hardened. He won because he kept copies of everything. Every deed, every contract, every payment record. Levi understood immediately. So you did the same thing here? Yes. Good thing, too. She pointed to several documents. Someone's been forging transfers, selling my land in small parcels. Rebecca examined the papers more closely. Her limited reading skills could still spot irregularities. These signatures don't match. Exactly. And look at the dates. Celeste arranged several deeds in chronological order. 3 sales completed after my husband's death, before his will was even read. Levi pulled up a chair. Who's been buying the land? Different names on each deed, but I recognize the legal language. Same phrases, same format. Celeste's voice grew cold. Same lawyer wrote them all. The pieces clicked together in Levi's mind. Blackwood. Has to be. He's the only one with enough influence to make this work. Rebecca stood and moved to the window. The families who lost their farms. Pike enforcing sudden tax liens. Same pattern. Celeste gathered the documents back into their protective wrapping. Create a legal crisis. Force quick sales. Buy the land for pennies. Levi's jaw tightened with anger. How many people has he cheated? Dozens, probably, maybe more. Celeste rewrapped the papers carefully. My land was just the biggest prize. A horse approached outside. Rebecca peered through the curtains. Sheriff Pike. Alone this time. Celeste quickly hid the documents in her carpetbag. Levi opened the door before Pike could knock. Sheriff Levi, need to speak with you and the woman. About what? Pike's expression seemed different today. Less aggressive, more cautious. May I come in? Levi stepped aside reluctantly. Pike entered and removed his hat. He glanced around the simple room nervously. What I'm about to say stays between us. Rebecca crossed her arms. Speak plainly. Pike took a deep breath. I'm not really Sheriff Pike. The words hung in the air like smoke. Federal Marshal Augustus Pike. Been investigating land fraud in 3 counties. Celeste felt her heart stop. Federal Marshal. Been building a case against Blackwood for 8 months. Your arrival complicated things. How so? Levi asked. Pike's eyes focused on Celeste. Because you're Celeste Hartwell, rightful owner of the land Blackwood's been selling. She said nothing, gave nothing away. I know who you are, Mrs. Hartwell. Been looking for you since your husband died. Why? Because your testimony could put Blackwood away for life. Your documents could restore property to dozens of families. Rebecca moved protectively closer to Celeste. What documents? Pike smiled grimly. The ones sewn into her dress lining. The ones that prove systematic fraud across half the county. Celeste realized she'd been holding her breath. You've been watching us. Protecting you. Blackwood has men looking everywhere. Pike replaced his hat. Time's running short, though. What do you mean? Town council meets tomorrow night. Blackwood's calling for a vote on undesirable elements in the community. Pike's meaning was clear. specifically about forcing certain people to move on. Levi stepped forward. They can't force anyone off private property. They can, if they create the right legal justification, emergency health measures, public safety concerns. Celeste understood the trap closing around them. He's going to manufacture a crisis. Already started. Anonymous complaints about disease risk, moral corruption, community standards. Rebecca's face flushed with anger. Lies. Of course. But effective lies. Pike moved toward the door. We need to act fast. What do you suggest? Celeste asked. Pike paused with his hand on the doorknob. Tomorrow night, council meeting. You stand up and tell the truth. That's suicide. Maybe. Or maybe it's the only way to save everyone Blackwood's hurt. After Pike left, the farmhouse fell silent again. Outside, evening shadows stretched across the prairie. Celeste looked at Levi and Rebecca. These people had shown her kindness when the world offered only cruelty. Now she had to decide whether to risk their lives along with her own. The town hall buzzed with nervous energy. Oil lamps cast flickering shadows on worried faces. Families who'd lost their farms sat in the back rows. Their eyes held the hollow look of people with nothing left to lose. Mayor Blackwood commanded the front of the room like a king holding court. His expensive suit and gold watch chain gleamed under the lamplight. Council members flanked him on either side. Celeste entered through the rear door. Whispers followed her movement down the center aisle. Some townspeople pointed. Others turned away in disgust. She wore her cleanest dress. Rebecca had helped arrange her hair in a respectable bun. The carpet bag containing the documents never left her side. Levi and Rebecca took seats near the middle. Their presence drew disapproving stares from other community members. The Amish rarely involved themselves in town politics. Ladies and gentlemen, Blackwood's voice boomed across the room. We gather tonight to address a growing concern in our community. He gestured toward Celeste without looking directly at her. Undesirable elements have taken root among us. Drifters, beggars, people who contribute nothing while consuming our resources. Murmurs of agreement rippled through certain sections of the crowd. Furthermore, these individuals pose health risks to our children, moral corruption to our youth. Mrs. Henderson, the banker's wife, nodded vigorously. Something must be done. Blackwood smiled with practiced sympathy. Indeed. Which is why I propose an immediate ordinance requiring transients to move on within 24 hours. The motion received quick seconds from his allies. No, debate was offered. Celeste stood slowly. Her legs trembled beneath her skirts. I request permission to address the council. Blackwood's smile faltered slightly. This meeting is for residents only. I am a resident. Her voice carried farther than expected. I own property in this county. Laughter erupted from several corners of the room. Someone called out about beggars owning land. 15,000 acres, Celeste continued clearly. The laughter died instantly. She opened her carpet bag and withdrew the wrapped documents. The oiled cloth caught the lamplight as she unfolded it on the nearest table. The Hartwell Ranch, inherited from my father, confirmed by my husband's will. She held up the first deed. Legally mine, under Missouri territorial law. Blackwood's face had gone pale. Those documents could be forged. They could be, but they're not. Celeste spread more papers across the table. Unlike these, she displayed a series of deeds bearing official seals. Land transfers dated after my husband's death. Sales I never authorized. The crowd pressed closer to see the documents. Even Blackwood's supporters seemed curious now. Property sold to various buyers at suspiciously low prices. Celeste's confidence grew with each revelation. Thomas Morrison, Sarah Webb, James Fletcher. She looked directly at Blackwood for the first time. "Tell me, Mayor, do you know any of these buyers personally?" Blackwood loosened his tie. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool evening air. "I couldn't possibly know every land transaction in the county." "Really?" Celeste picked up another document. "Because your signature appears as witness on all of them." The room fell silent except for the crackling of lamp flames. She continued methodically. "Your legal seal validates each transfer. Your handwriting appears on the notarization." An elderly farmer in the back row stood up. "My property was sold the same way. Never signed nothing." Another voice joined him. "Mine too. Sheriff Pike said I owed back taxes." "Lies," Mrs. Henderson protested. "Sheriff Pike enforces the law fairly." The crowd turned as Pike himself entered through the main doors. His badge caught the light as he walked slowly down the center aisle. "Actually, Mrs. Henderson, there's something you all should know." He reached the front of the room and faced the assembly. "I'm not Sheriff Pike. I'm Federal Marshal Augustus Pike. I've been investigating land fraud in this county for 8 months." Gasps echoed through the hall. Blackwood took a step backward. "These allegations are preposterous," he sputtered. "Marshal or not, you have no jurisdiction here." Pike smiled grimly. "Federal crimes give me jurisdiction anywhere." Celeste seized the moment. "Mayor Blackwood has been systematically stealing land from county residents. My property was simply the largest target." She addressed the crowd directly now. "How many of you received sudden tax bills, emergency assessments, legal notices demanding immediate payment?" Hands rose throughout the room. More than half the families present. "And when you couldn't pay, who bought your land for pennies on the dollar?" The answer came from multiple voices. "Blackwood. Or his associates." Pike nodded approvingly. "Mrs. Hartwell's documents prove a conspiracy involving forged deeds, false tax assessments, and fraudulent transfers." Blackwood made a move toward the door. 2 men in federal badges stepped inside to block his exit. "The scheme affected over 40 families," Pike continued. "Properties worth hundreds of thousands of dollars stolen through fabricated legal procedures." Celeste felt a surge of satisfaction, mixed with sadness. Justice was finally within reach. But too many people had already suffered. "What happens now?" asked the elderly farmer. Pike gestured to Celeste. "Mrs. Hartwell's evidence will allow us to restore stolen property to its rightful owners. And compensation for our losses? Blackwood's assets will be seized to provide restitution." The crowd's mood shifted from anger to hope. Families who'd lost everything began to see a future again. Celeste looked at Levi and Rebecca. Their faces showed pride mixed with amazement. The desperate woman they'd sheltered had transformed into an agent of justice, but as federal agents placed Blackwood in custody, Celeste knew the real work was just beginning. Restoring property was only the first step. Rebuilding lives would take much longer. The truth had set them all free. Now they had to figure out what freedom actually meant. The aftermath of Blackwood's brought chaos to Millbrook. Federal agents swarmed the town hall collecting evidence. Boxes of documents disappeared into government wagons. Witnesses lined up to give testimony about stolen land. Celeste found herself at the center of it all. Marshal Pike had commandeered the mayor's office as temporary headquarters. Maps covered every surface showing property boundaries and ownership disputes. 43 families affected, Pike said, marking another location on the largest map. Some lost everything, others just pieces of their holdings. Celeste studied the patterns emerging. Blackwood had been methodical, strategic. He'd targeted the most vulnerable first. The elderly farmers, widows with children, recent immigrants who barely spoke English. She traced lines between affected properties. Anyone who couldn't fight back effectively, Pike nodded grimly. Classic predatory behavior. Build confidence with small successes before attempting larger thefts. Like my ranch. Exactly. 15,000 acres would have set him up for life. Outside the window, Celeste watched townspeople gathering in small groups. Their conversations looked heated. Gestures grew animated as discussions continued. They're scared, she observed. Should be. Half the town council was involved. The bank president. 3 prominent merchants. Pike added more marks to his map. Blackwood didn't work alone. Rebecca appeared in the doorway carrying a lunch basket. Her face showed concern mixed with determination. The ladies from church are organizing meals for displaced families, she announced. Would you like to help? Celeste welcomed the distraction from legal proceedings. She followed Rebecca to the church basement where women sorted clothing donations and prepared food. The reception was mixed. Some women embraced her as a hero who'd exposed corruption. Others remained suspicious of her motives and background. Mrs. Patterson, the minister's wife, worked alongside them quietly. Finally, she spoke what others were thinking. You could have revealed the truth months ago, saved people from losing their homes. The accusation stung because it held truth. Celeste had prioritized her own safety over community welfare. You're right, she admitted. I was afraid. Of what? Death. The same people who killed my husband were hunting me. Celeste folded blankets with methodical precision. But that doesn't excuse my silence. Mrs. Patterson's expression softened slightly. What happens to us now? Marshal Pike says stolen property will be returned. Blackwood's assets will provide compensation for damages. And you? Will you stay in Millbrook? Celeste hadn't considered the question seriously. Her focus had been survival. Then justice. The future remained undefined. I don't know. That evening she walked with Levi through his fields. The prairie stretched endlessly under a canopy of stars. The peaceful scene contrasted sharply with recent turmoil. The Amish community has questions, Levi said eventually, about harboring me, about my intentions going forward. He stopped walking and turned to face her. About our relationship. Celeste felt her cheeks warm despite the cool air. Their bond had grown stronger through shared danger. But practical realities remained. I'm not Amish, Levi. You could be, if you chose that path. The possibility had occurred to her during quiet moments. The simple life held appeal after years of complexity and conflict. What would that mean exactly? Joining our church, adopting our ways, committing to our community permanently. They resumed walking in comfortable silence. Celeste weighed the implications carefully. I'd have to give up my wealth. Not necessarily, but you'd need to use it in ways consistent with our values. She thought about the displaced families, the children without homes, the elderly farmers facing uncertain futures. Helping others rebuild their lives? Exactly. The idea appealed to her more than keeping the fortune for personal luxury. Her father had always taught that wealth brought responsibility. There's another option, Levi continued carefully, which is we could leave together. Start fresh somewhere else. Celeste stopped walking. The suggestion surprised her. You'd abandon your community? For you? Yes. The simple declaration carried enormous weight. Levi would sacrifice everything he'd known for their relationship. I can't let you do that. It's not your choice to make. They'd reached the farmhouse porch. Rebecca sat in her rocking chair, mending clothes by lantern light. Decision for another day, the older woman said without looking up. Tonight we rest. Tomorrow we face whatever comes. Her wisdom provided comfort. Some choices required time and careful consideration. Inside, Celeste found a letter waiting on the kitchen table. Marshal Pike's official seal marked the envelope. The contents outlined next steps in the legal process. Federal prosecutors in Kansas City wanted her testimony. The trial could take months. Dozens of witnesses would be called. He wants me to relocate temporarily, she told Levi and Rebecca. Protective custody until the proceedings conclude. How long? Rebecca asked. 6 months minimum. Possibly longer. The timeline complicated everything, their relationship, her future plans, the community's recovery efforts. I have to go, she said finally. These people deserve justice. Other communities need protection from similar schemes. Levi nodded reluctantly. When do you leave? 3 days. Enough time to finalize property restorations and organize community support. Rebecca folded the letter carefully. Then we make these 3 days count. That night, Celeste lay awake thinking about paths not yet chosen. Justice demanded sacrifice. Love required compromise. Community needed leadership. Tomorrow would bring difficult conversations and painful goodbyes. But tonight, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope for a future worth fighting to achieve. The federal courthouse in Kansas City towered over surrounding buildings like a monument to justice. Celeste climbed the marble steps with Marshal Pike beside her. 6 months of preparation had led to this moment. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with activity. Prosecutors arranged evidence boxes. Journeys with their clients. Newspaper reporters filled the gallery seats. Celeste recognized many faces from Millbrook. Families who'd lost their homes sat in the front rows. Their presence gave her strength for the testimony ahead. Judge Harrison called the court to order. His stern expression suggested no tolerance for legal games or delays. The United States versus Cornelius Blackwood and Associates. Charges of conspiracy, fraud, and theft of federal lands. Blackwood sat at the defendant's table in expensive clothes that couldn't hide his diminished status. His confident demeanor from Millbrook had vanished completely. The prosecution outlined their case methodically. Forged documents, false tax assessments, systematic theft spanning 3 years. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case represents the worst kind of corruption. Powerful men preying on vulnerable families for personal gain. When Celeste took the witness stand, the courtroom fell silent. She wore a simple blue dress that conveyed respectability without ostentation. Please state your name for the record. Celeste Marie Hartwell. And how do you know the defendant? He stole my land, 15,000 acres inherited from my father. The prosecutor guided her through the evidence systematically. Each forged deed, every false signature, all the fraudulent transfers. How did you first discover these crimes? When I arrived in Millbrook seeking shelter, kind people helped me examine documents I'd hidden for protection. She described finding refuge with Levi and Rebecca, their willingness to help a stranger, the discovery of the theft. What motivated you to come forward publicly? Celeste looked at the Millbrook families in the gallery. Other people were suffering, losing their homes to the same schemes that targeted my property. Blackwood's attorney tried to discredit her testimony during cross-examination. He painted her as a vengeful woman seeking personal gain. Isn't it true you fabricated evidence to steal property that wasn't rightfully yours? No, sir. Every document has been verified by federal handwriting experts. You claim to own 15,000 acres, yet you arrived in Millbrook as a beggar. Celeste straightened in her chair. I was hiding from people who wanted to kill me. The same people who murdered my husband. The admission sent whispers through the courtroom. Judge Harrison called for order. Murdered your husband? That's quite an accusation. Thomas Hartwell died in a suspicious riding accident. 3 days later, men came looking for land documents. I escaped with my life and the papers. The prosecutor objected to the defense attorney's fishing expedition. Judge Harrison sustained the objection, but allowed Celeste to complete her answer. I lived in hiding because telling the truth meant death. When I found people being hurt by the same criminals, I chose justice over safety. Her words carried conviction that impressed the jury. Several nodded approvingly at her courage. The trial continued for 2 weeks. Witness after witness described similar experiences. Sudden tax bills, forced sales, Sheriff Pike enforcing fraudulent liens. The real Marshal Pike testified about his undercover investigation, how he'd gathered evidence while pretending to be Blackwood's corrupt ally. The defendant operated with complete impunity. He believed local connections made him untouchable. Bank records showed the scope of the conspiracy. Hundreds of thousands of dollars stolen through systematic fraud. Money funneled through shell companies and false identities. Dr. Morrison, the elderly farmer who'd lost his homestead, provided the most emotional testimony. Worked that land for 30 years, built everything with these hands. He held up calloused palms for the jury to see. They took it all in one afternoon. His voice broke as he described watching strangers auction his livestock, his wife packing their few remaining possessions into a wagon. "Where did you go after losing your farm?" "Nowhere to go. Lived in our wagon until Mrs. Hartwell stepped forward." Her courage gave us hope. Similar stories emerged throughout the proceedings. Families destroyed by greed, communities devastated by corruption. But also stories of resilience, people helping neighbors, churches providing shelter, the human spirit refusing to surrender. Celeste watched from the gallery as closing arguments began. The prosecutor summarized the overwhelming evidence of guilt. These defendants destroyed lives for profit. They showed no mercy to their victims. You must show no mercy in your verdict. The defense attorney made a final desperate attempt to shift blame. He claimed Blackwood was merely a businessman making legitimate deals. "My client followed established legal procedures. If documents were forged, he was deceived like everyone else." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They returned with guilty verdicts on all counts. Judge Harrison's sentencing was swift and severe. 20 years in federal prison for Blackwood. His associates received sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years. Your crimes represent a betrayal of public trust that demands the harshest punishment available under a law. Outside the courthouse, Celeste found herself surrounded by grateful families. Tears mixed with laughter as justice finally arrived. Marshal Pike approached through the crowd. His expression carried satisfaction mixed with relief. "It's over. You can go home now." Home. The word carried new meaning after months of uncertainty. Celeste looked east toward Missouri, toward Millbrook, toward Levi and Rebecca, and a future. She was finally free to choose. The train would leave for Kansas City in the morning. From there, another train to Missouri. But tonight, she would sleep peacefully knowing justice had prevailed. The nightmare was finally ending. Tomorrow would bring new beginnings. The train whistle echoed across the Missouri prairie as Celeste stepped onto the Millbrook platform. 8 months had passed since she'd left for Kansas City. The town looked different now, cleaner, more prosperous. Hope had replaced the fear that once hung over every street corner. Levi waited beside his wagon wearing his best Sunday clothes. His face lit up when he saw her descending from the passenger car. Rebecca stood beside him, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. "Welcome home," Rebecca said simply. The word carried weight Celeste had never fully appreciated before. Home meant more than property or possessions. It meant belonging somewhere, being valued by people who mattered. They rode through town slowly so Celeste could observe the changes. New businesses had opened where Blackwood's cronies once operated. Fresh paint covered buildings that had been neglected for years. The federal restitution money arrived last month, Levi explained. Families are rebuilding what they lost. Dr. Morrison waved from his restored farmhouse porch. Mrs. Patterson tended flowers in her replanted garden. Children played in yards where despair had once reigned. And the Hartwell Ranch? Waiting for your return. Marshall Pike's men have been maintaining the property. They crested the hill overlooking her ancestral lands. 15,000 acres stretched to the horizon. Cattle grazed in pastures her father had established decades earlier. The main house stood proudly against the endless sky. But Celeste felt no overwhelming desire to reclaim her inheritance immediately. Other matters required attention first. "Take me to the church," she requested. The basement buzzed with activity. Women organized supplies for families still recovering from Blackwood's crimes. Men discussed plans for a new school. Children helped sort clothing donations. Mrs. Patterson looked up from her ledger books and smiled broadly. "Celeste, we've been expecting you." The warmth of the greeting surprised her. These people had once viewed her with suspicion and fear. Now they welcomed her as family. "How can I help?" "We're establishing a legal aid society. Help people understand their property rights. Prevent future fraud." The idea aligned perfectly with Celeste's intentions, "I'd like to fund that project." "Fund it?" "Completely. Building, staff, legal resources, whatever it takes." Conversations around the room gradually stopped as people realized what she was offering. "That would cost thousands of dollars," someone said. "I have thousands of dollars, more than I could spend in several lifetimes." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Celeste was giving away her fortune to help others. "Why?" Mrs. Patterson asked softly. "Because wealth without purpose is meaningless. My father taught me that money should serve people, not the other way around." Over the following days, plans took shape quickly. The Legal Aid Society would occupy a new building on Main Street. Local lawyers would provide services at reduced costs. Educational programs would teach families about contracts and property law. But Celeste's most significant decision involved her personal future. She found Levi repairing fence posts on his northern boundary. The physical work had always helped him think through difficult problems. "I've made my choice," she announced without preamble. He straightened and set down his tools. "About joining the community?" "About us." She'd spent months considering their relationship, the cultural differences, the religious implications, the practical challenges of building a life together. "I want to marry you, Levi, but I won't become Amish." His face showed surprise mixed with concern. "The community might not accept that arrangement. Then we'll create our own community, one that bridges different traditions and backgrounds." She outlined her vision, a settlement where Amish values of simplicity and service combined with broader social engagement, where people could worship differently while working toward common goals. Use part of the ranch for families who want that kind of life, simple living without complete isolation from the world. Levi considered the proposal carefully. It challenged traditional boundaries while respecting core principles. "What about your wealth?" "Establish a foundation. Permanent funding for education, legal aid, community development." She gestured toward the town in the distance. "Ensure this kind of corruption never happens again." The idea grew more appealing as they discussed details. Rebecca joined the conversation that evening, offering practical wisdom about community building. "Change comes slowly," she warned. "Some people will resist new ways of living. Then we start small and prove the concept works," Celeste replied. Within weeks, the first families expressed interest in joining their experimental community. Dr. Morrison wanted to participate while maintaining his farm. The minister's family appreciated the emphasis on service and simplicity. The legal aid building opened 3 months later. Celeste spoke at the dedication ceremony to a crowd that filled the entire street. Justice belongs to everyone, not just those who can afford expensive lawyers. This building represents our commitment to protecting each other. Applause echoed off surrounding buildings. The same people who'd once crossed streets to avoid her now cheered her leadership. The wedding took place in spring under flowering trees beside the Missouri River. Representatives from both communities attended. Amish families sat beside town residents. Different traditions blended into something entirely new. Marshal Pike served as witness. "Never seen a case with such a positive outcome," he told the gathered crowd. As summer arrived, the experimental community grew to include 20 families. Children played together regardless of their parents' backgrounds. Adults shared knowledge and resources freely. Celeste stood on her porch one evening watching the sunset paint the prairie gold and crimson. Levi joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. "Any regrets?" he asked. She considered the question seriously. She'd given up tremendous wealth and social status, chosen uncertainty over security, risked everything for love and justice. None whatsoever. The answer carried absolute conviction. She'd found something worth more than money or property, a purpose that would last beyond her lifetime. In the distance, lamplights flickered in windows where families gathered for evening meals. Children's laughter carried on the gentle breeze. The community they'd built together was thriving. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. But tonight, surrounded by people she loved in a place she'd helped create, Celeste Hartwell Stoltzfus was exactly where she belonged.